Welcome to Loup TV. I'm your host, Gene Munster, along with Loup's Doug Clinton. Our topic today is Doug Rogers' long-anticipated decision related to the Apple Epic trial. We finally got it. We're expecting it sometime in June. Here we are in September, and the ruling is there were 10 counts. Apple won 9 of the 10 counts, and most notably that they are not monopolistic. It is not illegal to run a business for profit. Good news for Apple. The bad news for Apple that's catching most of the attention today is that they did lose 1 of the 10 counts, and that was related to the steering capability, the ability for app developers to message in-app to their users to have a direct payment relationship with them, to go outside of Apple's walls. Of course, Apple makes money in the App Store. And just to frame that in quickly is that the App Store is about 7% of total Apple revenue. And our best estimate is that it's about 14% of total profit. From just the services segment, it's about 35% of total services revenue. And so the steering component does chip away a road. It gives another option for app developers to have a paying relationship where they avoid that 15 or 30% take rate. And so this accommodation, this ruling on the steering was anticipated by us. We've talked about since the beginning of the summer that this was the most likely outcome. And in fact, we have it. And I wanted to turn it over to you, Doug. The news comes out. You see how this unfolded largely as we had expected, but I'm sure there was some new insights from your end. How did you see it?
I'd say, oddly, it probably doesn't feel like a win to either side. You know, I'm sure Apple obviously would like to keep its policies in place and have sort of anti-steering mechanisms that they've built into the App Store. And I think that Epic is probably dissatisfied because they wanted a stronger ruling. Obviously, they want to win. They want to have their own payment mechanism in their app. They don't want to have to steer. And so I think that even though this outcome, the stock market is telling us it's bad for Apple, Apple's down. If you look across the board at other app developers, most of them are up. Bumble, Match, they're up 6-7% right now. And so I think that, you know, it's probably this situation where, you know, neither side is totally satisfied, but I do think the winners probably are some of the bigger app developers who have been hoping that this policy would change so they could go off app for these payment relationships.
And that bigger app developer theme, the idea about going around Apple's payroll is nothing new. We, of course, had Netflix and Spotify do this for new subscribers. That's been over the past couple of years. We haven't seen an impact in the overall services growth rate with those, I guess, defections. It is different, the dynamic around subscription versus in-app purchases. About 80% of the app purchases, the app revenue comes from the gaming segment. Of course, Netflix and Spotify are outside of that. And Doug, why don't you walk through why that the in-app purchase dynamic is different than the subscription? Why is this simply just a total non-event, just like Netflix and Spotify have been?
Well, I think for Netflix and Spotify, if you think about kind of the mechanism, if you're a new Netflix subscriber, you don't have an account, you download Netflix to your iPhone and you have to sign up, obviously. To use Netflix, you have to be a paying subscriber. There's no free account version. And so I think in the old world, prior to the changes that we've had here, and Apple has made some changes kind of on their own the last couple of months through the trial as well regarding steering. The old world, you would sign up for Netflix and Netflix would tell you, unfortunately, you can't complete your account creation, you know, on app. You have to go to a desktop or you have to go to the web. What's different to me when you think about game developers, because there's usually not a subscription involved there. Usually it's per transaction. So if you want to buy V-Bucks in Epic's Fortnite, you would go and when you need V-Bucks to buy skins or do things in the game, you would just kind of do it ad hoc as needed. And I think that that's a different experience as a customer, because instead of having one transaction where you're subscribing and then your card gets charged every single month by Netflix, you have this ad hoc thing where it's maybe I need to buy V-Bucks 5 times this week. And then maybe next week I only buy it once. And next month I buy it 50 times. Who knows? But if you have to get steered off the app every single time to do this sort of transaction, it's a much worse user experience than Netflix, where they only have to steer you off one time and then the relationship kind of keeps going.
We don't know because we haven't seen an implementation of this, but do you expect that with the game developers and these in-app purchases that you're going to get steered every time you need to reload your V-Bucks, or is it one and done?
My guess is every time, because if you are in app and your account says 0 and you click to try to add, then obviously, Epic wants the control to say, hey, Gene, you need to go to epicgames.com and refresh there instead of here in app. So I do think it'll be kind of a persistent thing. One thing that I think will be fun to see is, now that we have these kind of new steering policies in place, people are creative and these companies are creative, and it'll be interesting to see how they try to use the new rules and optimize their transaction flows. One example could be, the situation you just mentioned of, do I have to go every time to kind of refresh my account? They could offer bigger discounts if they see you're coming from an iPhone, and say, instead of buying $10, maybe you want to top up with $20 and we'll give you an incremental 10% bonus or something like that. So it'll be fun to see kind of the gamesmanship they use to leverage the steering that they can do now.
Hold on the math for the developers around this. And I want to go to the friction piece. I'm a believer that when you add friction like that, re-upping, having to go off, even though it seems easy to click on a link and go to your mobile browser and reload, I think that most people are going to take the most convenient way. Another way to say it, I think people are lazy and they're going to want to transact inside of Apple's ecosystem. So I think that is an advantage that Apple will have, kind of the simplicity of their offering. There is the question too around what is the cost advantage, and getting to your second part of your comment, the model, and it is rooted in the conversion rate. That's what they're going to be looking most at. So at the most basic level, if you're an app developer that's paying 30% and you move to this steering approach, so you no longer offer Apple as a payment option, then your payment option would be to go direct to them, and you lose 10% of your users because you did that, you're going to have some sort of a drop off. Then that equation is positive. You are not paying the 30% out, you're losing 10%. Conceptually, you should be in the positive there. Conversely, if you lose 40% of your revenue because of the extra friction there, then you are, it's more to your advantage as a developer to go back to inside the paid wall just because of the friction and conversion. And so that's at the most basic level. I don't know if a 50%, a 40%, a 35% drop off, of 5%, I don't know what the number is, but I do suspect that it's the overall impact is going to be well below what the numbers. I just want to kind of recap my view of it, and I'll turn over Doug to give you a chance here. But I mentioned earlier that 7% of revenue comes from our app total revenue, 14% of earnings. I think that at most you're going to see a 2% impact here and a 4% impact on earnings. That's at most. I think most likely it's probably going to be 1%. It will persist in the sense that this is going to be a topic on every Apple earnings call for the next 3 quarters, because they're going to be talking about the impact and the onboarding of this. What's your take in terms of the financial impact?
I'd probably take the over on the bogeys that you offered, although I don't think that'll be significantly above what you just said. I don't see it being a double-digit impact or anything like that. But I do think it's real, and I think that these big publishers, a lot of them have strong brands, they have strong relationships with their customers. I think it'll be easy for them to steer consumers off of the apps and do transactions on their own websites. But you're right, though, it's a fundamental truth. Every click that you add to an online transaction flow reduces your conversion in the funnel. I mean, that's a fundamental reality. And so the math that you described is what all these companies will have to do. I do think that they have tools, though, where they can try to optimize, maybe increase the size of transactions. So even if they have an impact, like you described earlier, in terms of users, if they can get people to convert on bigger plans, higher price plans, longer duration plans, I think that could be something that works for them. And like I said before, I think there's going to be a lot of creative things that these companies do to try to optimize their payment flow now that they can direct people off of their apps.
good news for those of you who may have enjoyed kind of anticipating what the ruling from Judge Rogers has been and the impact to App Store is that this conversation around App Store and its regulation is far from over. The next wave is going to be around should Apple allow third-party app stores on iOS, and then eventually the take rate. I think the take rates do hold. I think it's outside of the long arm of jurisdiction. I think it's very much on the table that they may eventually have to be allowed to allow third-party app stores on iOS. This will be continued, in other words, on behalf of Doug and myself, Gene. Bye for now.